The dynamic island that Apple introduced recently is chock full of interesting design details. In this video, I'll break down these details, how they work, and show an interactive prototype I made that strives to emulate all these details too. Hi, I'm Wayne, welcome to my channel. Let's unpack the dynamic island. For me, the reason that the dynamic island was so striking was because it kind of felt like a reversal. Punchouts and notches in mobile devices feel more like problems rather than opportunities. How you frame that from the start can shape your entire design approach. When you frame something as a problem, sometimes you're just trying to overcome it, resolve it, make it kind of invisible in the experience. The dynamic island subverts that. It draws your eye. It's a centerpiece for your attention and your interaction. They decided that this was going to be an opportunity rather than a problem when designing for it. Thus the immediate reaction of, damn, that's pretty clever. As they showed more, even in rapid-fire fashion, you could see a lot of details in this implementation. It's highly configurable in its sizing, and based on the size, a lot of elements react differently and dynamically. I analyzed it by scrubbing through the video, and also I reverse engineered a prototype so I could better understand how it all works. Here's what I found. First, let's focus on the status bar. This is where a lot of interesting details are happening. The clock and the status bar icons adapt based on the start and end dimensions of the dynamic island. For the clock, generally if there's space for it, it's mostly centered in the available space, with a bit of optical adjustment for the screen's rounded corner on the left side. If there's room for it in the end state, it'll shift over, reacting to the width of the dynamic island. If there isn't room for it in the end state, it'll drop into the background immediately. Weirdly, it seems to shift inwards when it's dropping backwards in most examples, but in one example with a music player, it gets pushed outwards. Not sure what the logic is here, but it must be intentional. I just don't quite understand it. Let's move over to the right side towards the status bar icons. There are a few variations here based on the island width. First, when it's only a little wider than default, it keeps all the icons visible, but shifts them over a little bit. This creates just enough room to show about one icon on either side, like the lock icon when you're unlocking the screen. If you get wider than that, it starts to remove icons. Interestingly, the Wi-Fi icon goes first, then the cell icon, and then finally the battery. However, if the dynamic island is going to be so wide that it would obscure all these icons in its end state, it'll drop them all out of view at the same time, rather than staggering how they drop out of view. I want to put extra emphasis on the idea that they are dropping out of view rather than just vanishing altogether. Let's dig into this effect. I see three effects in play here. First of all is opacity. This is an obvious one to remove it from visibility, probably the first thing most designers would do. The other two effects are scaling and blurring. These are why I think this is interesting, because I think these are part of the same idea. You scale it down to simulate moving it further back, and blur it to simulate the idea of depth of field from the point of view of a camera lens. My theory for this is based on the physical constraints of what the dynamic island is. The dynamic island lives in the foreground. It's based on the actual screen cutout, so nothing can go in front of it. If you want to create extra contrast using depth, it means that the dynamic island is a fixed point and other elements are going to have to move further back. Other elements basically have to get out of the way as the dynamic island expands and takes up that real estate on the screen. All this stuff happens really quickly. It's easy to miss, but I really love this detail. Next, let's talk about the overall scale and animation of that scaling. The dynamic island has a bit of spring to its motion, but it's not just the outer container, it's also tied to the contents. If you prototype for this, you'll want to anchor your contents to the outside edges. I've set up the prototype to do this with some test elements here, anchoring the elements to the outside edge. With some knowledge of how Origami Studio works, you can put your own designs into this prototype file and have that stuff react accordingly. The last detail is about the shadows that the dynamic island casts. Multiple shadows in a way. First, it has a normal drop shadow, but second, it has a drop blur. It's a tough detail to replicate dynamically. It was tricky to do in Origami Studio and impossible in Figma to do dynamically. There's a blur occurring around the dynamic island with a gradual fall off. Here's my theory around this. If you were displaying a modal, you sometimes darken or blur the whole background where you're just able to see a little bit of it around the edge. That helps exaggerate the idea of it being in the foreground and directs your attention to the foreground element. However, with the dynamic island, you still see a lot of the screen. Users may be referencing the screen information, so you want to avoid obscuring all of that. I think they're trying to split the difference here. There's just a hint of the effect to pay homage to the idea that there is a depth of field, but not so much that it's going to impact the usability of the rest of the screen. Okay, so those are all the details that I've found. Now let's switch over to talk about the prototype and how I tried to replicate those details inside there. Here's the prototype that I made within Origami Studio to try and emulate all of these details. Okay, so first of all, you can toggle the state of the dynamic island by clicking up here, or you can also use the toggle in this debug interface, which you can also collapse as well if you want to get that out of the way when you're doing some testing. You can also adjust the size of this dynamic island with the height and the width completely freely when it's in that open state, or you can just drop that down so you can see how it's actually going to properly animate to that target state as well. You'll notice a couple of notches on this width one in particular. That is just a little guide to show you how some breakpoints of how things react when certain icons are dropping out of view or when all the icons are going to go away. Here's a fun little detail. The width of the dynamic island has to adjust based on the radius of the screen itself. It cannot be full width at this minimum height, because otherwise it would interfere with the actual rounded corners of the screen itself. So it expands as it goes downwards, or rather as it grows in height, and then reaches a maximum width right around there, and then you can extend that however you want. So you don't have to worry about that. The prototype will just take care of that. If you're on device and don't have an iPhone 14 Pro, you can also adjust it so the screen offsets below where the notch would be. Let me show you with Origami Studio. You can simulate that a little bit. So here, even in this simulation, the notch is completely blocking or really obscuring that dynamic island, interfering. So you can just toggle this, it's going to shift downwards, and now you can still mess with it in here or on your non-iPhone 14 Pro device too. Also, there is a little bit of a toggle here, so you can also see where the non-usable cutout is for the actual sensor array. One more detail that I want to make sure is being shared here is it also is applying the right drop shadow and the background blur to the dynamic island. Now that is only going to show up on the Mac version of this. Unfortunately, Origami Studio's blur effect isn't supported on devices, so it's just not going to show up. It's not going to cause any errors. It just will look nice and crisp, unfortunately, under that area. But that's it. If you do want to just open this file in Origami Studio and know how to use it, you're going to be able to configure a whole lot more and also drop your own designs into it and do some more testing. So hopefully you can have fun with that. And there's the prototype. For all the designers out there, I hope this is interesting to you, and I hope better understanding this is going to help better inform how you might design around this feature. Okay, let's wrap this up. First of all, thank you for watching. I had a lot of fun scrubbing through this video, analyzing it, unpacking it, and also creating that prototype to better understand everything. The reason I did this is because I think that when we see really good design out there, it's healthy to recognize it, understand it, and therefore it can help inspire us and improve all of our work as well. For a couple more details on this prototype, if you want to just try it out without any knowledge of Origami Studio, all you have to do is download the Origami Studio app on your Mac or Origami Live app on your iOS device. Both are free. Links are in the description. If you want to use this to try and integrate your designs into it, good news is I just finished a tutorial series on Origami Studio. You can find the playlist right here. If you like this video, I'd really appreciate a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you're interested in any other videos from the point of view of a designer, which is me. So thank you for watching, and that's it. Hope to see you again soon. Take care.